Most guitarists noodled. Nuno carved. Some chased speed. Nuno chased power. When others floated on top, he sank the foundation. Every note they played evaporated. Every note he played left a scar. And by the time they understood, it was too late.
Like, subscribe. Thank you.
Before the world even knew his name, Nuno Bettencourt was already breaking rules. A drummer first, a guitarist by obsession, and a rhythmic freak of nature by blood, he wasn't just another shredder looking to stack solos. He was a one-man pocket, swinging funk through hard rock with a surgeon's precision. Growing up the youngest of 10 in a cramped Massachusetts house, he absorbed every sound from James Brown to Led Zeppelin, stitching them into this rhythmic language nobody else could even speak. By the time he helped build Extreme from a Boston bar band into a global phenomenon, Bettencourt wasn't just rewriting guitar heroism, he was detonating it. His solos grooved, muttered, and exploded with the syncopated madness no one had ever heard in a hair metal band. But when the world tried to box him in, he slipped through, drumming on guitars, slapping acoustic strings like a back alley brawl, pulling from funk, jazz, and chaos, but always landing clean, locked, and lethal. Nuno Bettencourt's story doesn't start with a bang. It starts with a quiet storm brewing on a tiny island in the Azores. Born on September 20th, 1966, in Praia da Vitória, on the island of Terceira, Nuno's first steps into the world weren't exactly into a music capital, but fate had bigger stages in mind. When he was just 4, his family packed up and relocated to Hudson, Massachusetts, a sleepy town that would unknowingly become the launch pad for one of rock's most explosive guitar talents. Life in the Bettencourt household was a full-blown sonic buffet. As the youngest of 10 kids, Nuno marinated in music, bouncing between bedrooms where everything from soul to rock to funk bled through the walls. And this musical hodgepodge just rewired his brain. The percussive heartbeat of his Portuguese roots also throbbed deep in the DNA, giving him an innate sense of rhythm that would later turn his playing into something far more primal and dynamic than his peers. Long before he ever bent a note on the guitar, Nuno started with the drum. And it wasn't the flashy 10-tom drum solo insanity that caught his ear, it was the pocket, the groove, the kind of simple airtight rhythm that could move a whole room without ever breaking a sweat. And that obsession with groove would become a cornerstone of everything that he touched. His heroes weren't just rock gods, they were groove merchants. James Brown, Tower of Power. Even when he worshipped rock titans like Aerosmith, Zeppelin, Van Halen, it wasn't the bombast that grabbed him. It was that hidden funk lurking inside of songs like The Crunge, Take Your Whiskey Home, Dragon Attack. And by the way, if you haven't heard Dragon Attack by Queen, you certainly do not know what you are missing. To Nuno, even the heaviest rock needed to swing. Once a guitar entered the picture, it was game over. Nuno attacked that instrument like a man possessed, putting in the kind of obsessive hours that separate the dreamers from the freaks of nature. His playing evolved and exploded at the same time. Hudson may as well been the middle of nowhere, but inside that town, in some basement lit by nothing but pure ambition, a monster was in the making. Now, before he blew the doors off the rock world with Extreme, Nuno Bettencourt cut his teeth in a Boston hair metal band called Sinful. And while the band itself barely made a dent, anybody with ears could tell something ferocious was brewing in that guitar player of theirs. Those old demos? Smoking, jaw-dropping, pure undiluted Nuno, already brimming with that groove. And of course, throw in some good technical insanity and off-the-chain flair that would soon make him a name you didn't forget after that first solo, for good measure. Sinful might have fizzled out, but Nuno Bettencourt was just getting warmed up. Now, Extreme came storming out of Boston in '85. At the center of it all were vocalist Gary Cherone and drummer Paul Geary, two guys who already been banging around the scene in bands like Adrenaline and The Dream. But when CBS decided that they needed The Dream for a TV show that nobody remembers, Cherone and Geary were forced to ditch the name and start over. Good thing, too, because what came next wasn't just a new band, it was the beginning of something way louder, way cockier, and definitely way more dangerous. Enter Nuno Bettencourt. a kid already setting fire to the Boston guitar scene with his impossible chops and groove-drenched riffs. He completely detonated that lineup. Bassist Pat Badger rounded out the crew in '86, fresh out of a Berkeley-based group called In the Pink, and just like that, the core of Extreme was locked in. But there was a weird bit of 6 degrees of separation Kevin Bacon magic at play. Nuno's brother Paulo had played with Gary's brother Mark in a band called Flesh, a local Boston staple. It's like fate kept shoving them together until they finally picked up the hint. And the real surprise in all of this? Extreme almost never happened at all. A chance meeting, one that allegedly ended in an actual fist fight, could have torched the whole thing before it started. But instead of staying pissed off, they patched things up, bailed on their other bands, and decided to roll the dice together. And the name Extreme wasn't a random pick. It was actually a nod to their past, a sharp twist on X-Dream, signaling that they weren't looking back. From the jump, it was clear that this wasn't some garage band playing keg parties. Nuno and Gary Cherone totally clicked, building the songwriting partnership that was just as lethal as their live show. Extreme hit the New England club circuit like a runaway freight train, cranking out originals and steamrolling the local scene. Crowds were getting bigger. The awards started stacking up. In both 1986 and 1987, they were crowned Outstanding Hard Rock Heavy Metal Act at the Boston Music Awards, a clear sign that this wasn't just another band clawing for scraps. So now Extreme had arrived, and they weren't asking for permission. By late in 1987, the buzz around Extreme wasn't just barroom talk anymore. It was a kind of underground roar that record labels could not ignore. A&M Records A&R director Brian Huttenhauer heard the noise and made the call, officially signing Extreme to the label. It was a major break for a band still surviving on club gigs and hustle, but right as the ink was drying, A&M itself got swallowed up by Polygram in 1988, a chaotic corporate shuffle that could have buried a lesser band before they even started. Instead, Extreme barreled straight ahead, and when it came time to cut their first album, A&M didn't mess around. They paired Extreme with Reinhold Mack, better known as just Mack, the German producer-engineer who had worked with monsters like the Scorpions, the Stones, and Queen. Mack was a studio veteran who understood how to make groove-based rock explode out of the speakers. His work with Queen's The Game, an album Nuno Bettencourt worshipped, made him a perfect fit for the young band's fire and funk approach. Recording through the winter of 1988, Extreme hammered out their debut, a record soaked in swagger, technical wizardry, and this youthful cockiness that somehow never totally tipped into self-parody, though some would say it got close. Released on March 14, 1989, Extreme was initially labeled as a glam metal by A&M, but that box never quite fit. Critics picked up on that funkier DNA, drawing lines to acts like Living Colour, Faith No More. Sure, they had the teased hair and the leather jackets, but there's definitely something more going on underneath. Much slinkier and more rhythmic. Lyrically, the album was a messy love letter to adolescence. Awkward, horny, and at times cringeworthy. Songs like Little Girls, Kid Ego, Mother Don't Want to Go to School Today didn't exactly shoot for depth, but they didn't need to. They're snapshots of teenage hormonal imbalances loaded with enough wink-wink energy that you couldn't take them too seriously even if you tried. And when they did reach for something bigger, like the haunting Watching, Waiting, inspired by the crucifixion of Christ, or the Queen-inspired mini-epic Rock-a-Bye-Bye, you could hear the ambition starting to crack through the surface. Musically, though, that was where the real battle lines got drawn. Even on this debut, Nuno Bettencourt was playing like he was on a mission to bury every other guitar player of his generation. His solos did not just shred, they swung, mutated, exploded. One moment he was channeling Hendrix's Pure Fire. Next he was weaving Brian May harmonies so intricate they practically needed a roadmap. Nuno's sense of melody and rhythm is already off the charts, even if his early playing leaned a little flashier and more indulgent than the tighter grooves that he would master later. And the album dropped a few singles, with Kid Ego clawing its way to number 38 on the Billboard mainstream rock chart, a track that Gary Cherone would later admit made him cringe in hindsight. But the real Trojan horse was Play With Me, this blistering shred fest that got slapped onto the mall chase scene of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And this really gave Extreme their first taste of mainstream exposure, classically influenced bliss. And also what was mind-blowing was his unaccompanied solo in the lead-up to Mother Don't Want to Go to School Today. Cyclic arpeggios played with this level of precision people weren't used to. It was Eruption 3.0 with a totally new twist. Commercially, Extreme punched its weight and then some, peaking at number 80 on the Billboard 200 and selling around 300,000 copies. Not bad at all for a debut from a hard-to-categorize band at the tail end of the glam era. And more importantly, it was enough to convince the label that Extreme wasn't some one-album wonder. They were in it for the long haul. The touring followed, and it was brutal. Extreme hit the road non-stop throughout 1989, crisscrossing the U.S., with a vengeance that left no dive bar or theater unscathed. And they weren't just conquering America. By October, they were playing the first shows in Japan, a country that would soon embrace Extreme with a level of rabid devotion that made the U.S. fandom rock look casual by comparison. This was the beginning of something bigger, and the world did not know it yet. So if Extreme's debut was a warning shot, Extreme 2 Porno Graffiti was the full-blown blitzkrieg. When it came time to make their second album, A&M didn't want to gamble. They wanted a hit, so they brought in Michael Wagner, studio general behind hard rock heavyweights like Dokken, White Lion. And Wagner's hiring sent a clear message. Polish this thing, punch it up, make it loud enough to leave a crater. Recording kicked off partly at Cortland Recording in Hanson, Massachusetts, and from the jump, Porno Graffiti was something different. It wasn't just another glam metal record with prettier choruses. It was this twisted hybrid beast, mashing together metal, pop, George Clinton funk, acoustic balladry, like somebody dared them to break every single rule in the book. Where their debut had flirted with funk, Porno Graffiti went all in, thanks in no small part to Nuno Bettencourt's guitar wizardry. And Nuno came out swinging. His riffs were blistering, chopped up with funky syncopated attacks, sounding like James Brown got thrown into a wood chipper along with Eddie Van Halen. And his solos, they didn't just show off, they sang, dripping with these percussive attacks, rhythmic switch-ups, bass walk emulation, two-string tapping acrobatics, bluesy double stops, delay tricks that made his guitar sound like it was laughing at the laws of physics. Tracks like Flight of the Wounded Bumblebee didn't just hint at his talent, they threw it in your face and set it on fire. And of course, even Brian May of Queen had tipped his hat, calling Nuno's solo on Get the Funk Out a landmark in rock history. That deserved its own medal right there. Sharon, meanwhile, stepped up his lyrical game. Gone was the adolescent awkwardness that dotted the debut. Porno Graffiti was sharp, satirical, often hilarious, and sometimes downright heartfelt. It was still a bit cartoonish when it needed to be, but it also wasn't afraid to take a real swing at storytelling. And together, Sharon's theatrics, Bettencourt's guitar heroics created this sound that was tight, explosive, completely all their own. The singles, Decadence Dance, Get the Funk Out, hit the airwaves early, grabbing attention overseas, especially in the UK where Get the Funk Out cracked the top 20. But in the US, radio had no freaking idea what the hell to do with Extreme's funk metal circus. By early of 1991, the album was really slipping off the charts. But that's when the band pulled the biggest ace from their sleeve, More Than Words, an acoustic ballad, more Everly Brothers than Motley Crue. And it was everything the radio did not want, until it was everything that they needed. More than words. After a long, stubborn battle with the record label to get it released, More Than Words hit the Billboard Hot 100 and then just kept climbing. Didn't stop until it hit number 1. Suddenly, Extreme wasn't just another funky hair band, they were chart toppers. They followed it with Wholehearted, another acoustic-driven track which rocketed to number 4, and proved that they weren't just a one-ballad fluke. Porno Graffiti went nuclear. The album peaked at number 10 on the Billboard 200, turned gold by May 91, and hit double platinum by October of 1992. I'll leave that math up to you. But more importantly, it destroyed any notion that this band was just a footnote in the glam metal story. Critics caught up too. Rolling Stone, the magazine that really doesn't know much about music, still got it right, and they crowned Porno Graffiti one of the 50 greatest hair metal albums of all time. Not that it totally fit in the hair metal genre, but yet it kinda did, so we'll give that to them. While Ultimate Classic Rock put it even higher among the top 30 glam metal albums. Compared to the debut's charming immaturity, Porno Graffiti was a quantum leap forward in songwriting, musicianship, and vision. And at the heart of it all was Nuno Bettencourt's unstoppable guitar work. Now at this point, Nuno had both his sound and technique put together and firing on all cylinders. Let's delve deep into the pure science behind what makes Nuno such a beast on that guitar. Starting with the gear. We got the Washburn N4, born straight from Nuno's brain and unleashed in December of 1990. The N4 wasn't some slapped together vanity signature model. It's a scalpel built for speed, clarity, and maximum carnage. Hum canceling, searingly accurate thanks to those Bill Lawrence L500 XL pickups slotted right at the bridge. The N4 became the Nuno guitar, and still is. No muddy distortion or overcooked mids. The N4 was built to stay the hell out of the way so that the player's hands could do the talking. But it's not an easy beast to tame, and it punishes sloppy technique without mercy. But that's the thing about Nuno, who played so tightly that you could set a clock by his muting. And amp-wise, he wasn't about stacking walls of gear to look impressive. Bettencourt's early extreme tone lived inside the 80A M1 preamp, a rack-mounted tube monster that was practically the unofficial weapon of choice for late 80s studio shredder. While most guys dialed it into mushy oblivion, Nuno ran it clean and mean. He wanted that amp to support the guitar, not choke it. His philosophy was simple but ruthless. Amplification and pedals should get out of the way. No hiding, no excuses. And then there's the real voodoo, the dotted eighth note delay trick. Instead of cluttering his solos with a million pedals trying to fake rhythm, Nuno used a single brilliantly timed delay repeat. You play eighth notes, but thanks to the delay smacking back a dotted eighth later, phrasing feels like this unstoppable stream of 16th notes. And this actually harkens back to what Eddie Van Halen did on Cathedral. But this gave monster runs like the intro to He-Man Woman Hater, that hyperactive fluid groove without making it sound mechanical. Or some could say that it was sort of mechanical, but in this really cool way that was just so new at the time. Brian May pulled a similar stunt on Brighton Rock, but Nuno weaponized it for this whole new level of funk metal mayhem. And his effects philosophy followed the same law: color, not cover. A little chorus here, some MXR Phase 90 swirls later, Boss GT boards when the reliability mattered more than flash. But always the effects serve the playing, not the other way around. And the real secret sauce, though, not just the gear. It's how he attacks that guitar. His rhythm guitar playing is a masterclass in groove. Palm-muted funk slashes, percussive right-hand hits, syncopated explosions that make even the heaviest riffs kind of dance a bit. His solos can switch gears without warning. Clean legato runs into brutally articulate picking flurries, back into some greasy blues bends, all in the span of a few bars. And when it came time to strip it all down to acoustic tracks like More Than Words or Wholehearted, he proved he didn't need a wall of Marshalls to knock you flat, just a cheap acoustic and a sense of rhythm so deep it could stop time. But that's the thing about Nuno's playing, it displays a scientific precision. And a lot of this could be tied to that brain that moved like a drummer and thought like a funk band leader. Let's put it this way, people obsess over note choices. While note choices are important, a lot of people often forget what solid rhythm can do to really open up the note palette. And Nuno knows this instinctively. He could get more adventurous with note choices, because by locking them tightly in the pocket rhythmically, you could get away with a bit more insanity before the audience even notices. This dates back to Eddie Van Halen, who pulled all sorts of wild, out-of-scale tricks, but relied on that perfect placement of notes to make them land. But at the core of it all, Nuno's monstrous right hand. His picking attack isn't some random flailing. It's two-tiered, full-spectrum muting system. With his picking hand, he'd lay that fleshy part of the palm across the unused strings above the one he was playing, killing all the unwanted noise dead in its tracks. And then his fretting hand would mute everything below this played string, barely brushing against them. And the result? Chainmail clean note attack where every pluck popped right out of the mix. And plus you could hit that string hard with the pick, lay right into it as if you're strumming all 6 strings, but only one note coming out. And though it had that satisfying thump to the note, you could hear that in all the tracks, from Kid Ego to He-Man Woman Hater, where palm-muted hammer-ons and crushing rhythmic chunk transform what could have been stock riffs into these rhythmic battering rams. And Nuno wasn't just locking into the pocket on those songs, he was also stretching it, warping it. A lot of elastic timing, throwing in odd rhythmic groupings like 7-note runs against 4/4 backbeats. And of course you got the solo work, and here's where Nuno turned from killer to chemist. His use of tapping wasn't the generic triplet runs that you heard from every other 80s shredder. He'd do these intricate tap, pull, pull, hammer patterns, 2-string tapping with switch-offs, tap string skipping arpeggios, kind of this weird mutation of Paul Gilbert meeting Eddie Van Halen, but with this whole crazy funk undertone going on, even in the soloing itself. And his solos are littered with these high-speed lattice works of notes, always melodic, never just flash for its own sake. because they're always locked into the groove. And one of the most criminally underappreciated aspects of Nuno's playing, though, is his sneaky use of major and minor thirds, as well as major and minor sixths, borrowed right out of old school funk vocabulary. Instead of sticking to straight minor pentatonics or modal runs, Nuno would slide these between major and minor thirds, mid-phrase, or do a Dorian but kind of chuck in a little bit of a minor sixth in there, or the other way around. And it gave the solos that twitchy blues meets funk meets almost southern rock flavor, Kentucky Fried scales, a slight almost swampy tinge that you don't immediately notice until you realize, wait a second, this has got a hell of a lot more going on. And his acoustic work also carries that same rhythmic firepower. Songs like More Than Words, he didn't just strum, he turned that guitar into a percussive instrument, slapping the strings with the heel of the hand while weaving these elegant group string finger-picking patterns. It's a massive part of why More Than Words didn't sound just like another unplugged ballad. It grooved, even at whisper volume. And then, of course, Flight of the Wounded Bumblebee. That's where those dotted eighth note delay tricks kick in. Chorus, phase, harmonics, the crazy chromatic runs, and also the use of the pedal notes, where you do like an ostinato figure, where you have one note staying on the bottom and the other notes all changing up on the top and just batting back and forth between them, or the other way around. That's straight out of the classical playbook all the way. So coming off the wild success of Porno Graffiti, Extreme hit the road with the kind of momentum most bands would sell their soul for, touring relentlessly, cashing in on the monster hits and building an even bigger live reputation. And the real breakout moment, the one that shoved them onto the global stage they hadn't even cracked yet, was their performance at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert in April of '92. In front of a worldwide television audience of hundreds of millions, Extreme pulled off a bold move. They didn't just show up and play a song, they unleashed an acoustic medley that left jaws hanging. Suddenly they weren't just a hard rock band anymore, they're musicians. And Queen's fiercely loyal fan base really took notice. And the appearance could not have come at a better time. Because back home, the band was knee-deep in recording their most ambitious project yet, Three Sides to Every Story. Spring of '92 found them splitting their time between Abbey Road Studios and a handful of American sessions, crafting a record that left Porno Graffiti's funky, hard rock template in the dust. It was less about stacking riffs. Nuno Bettencourt, who had already proven himself as a guitar virtuoso, stepped up as a full-blown composer, writing and arranging full orchestral and brass sections. It was an outrageous leap for a band born into the glam metal era tail end, and it was clear that they weren't interested in sticking to the easy path. When Three Sides finally dropped on September 22nd of '92, it debuted strong, number 10 on the Billboard 200, matching Porno Graffiti's peak. But the musical landscape had changed. Grunge had exploded, Nirvana was smashing guitars instead of shredding solos, and authenticity suddenly meant shooting the big H and gazing at one's own shoes, not massive riffs and orchestrated epics. In that climate, Three Sides really struggled. Despite its technical brilliance and ambition, it only sold around 700,000 copies, a commercial disappointment compared to the double platinum giant that came before it. And the singles reflected this shift. Rest in Peace climbed to number 1 on the Billboard Album Rock Tracks chart, but barely scraped onto the Hot 100 at 96. Follow-up singles, Stop the World, Tragic Comic, didn't chart in the US at all. It wasn't that the songs were weak, they were meticulously crafted, loaded with these huge hooks, really much smarter lyrics, but the tides had turned. Mainstream rock was going into those darker, grittier waters, and Extreme's genre-bending orchestral funk rock masterpiece did not fit this new mold. Still though, the Three Sides to Every Story tour soldiered on, and the band stayed on the road extensively, trying to capitalize on the burst of international exposure from the Queen tribute show, in hopes of successfully promoting this new record. Audiences were bigger overseas, especially in territories where Porno Graffiti and their Mercury performance had made a deeper impact. For the band, the tour must have been a strange beast, playing to crowds that had discovered them through More Than Words, fighting to sell a conceptually dense album in a world now ruled by grunge. Critically, though, the album earned a different kind of respect. Some called it the band's tour de force, an album that traded MTV hits for some serious songwriting chops. Tracks like Am I Ever Gonna Change and the sprawling 3-part suite Everything Under the Sun showcased a band really firing on all cylinders, artistically if not commercially. In the big picture, the Three Sides to Every Story was a crossroads album. It proved that Extreme wasn't just about funky riffs. They could go into this other sophisticated direction, complex, even grandiose. But it also marked the beginning of a tougher road ahead. The signal that the world was changing faster than even their talent could keep up with. Somewhere backstage, between the sold-out arenas, shifting sands of the early 90s, that realization had to be starting to sink in by this time. And by 1995, the world Extreme had once ruled looked unrecognizable. And Waiting for the Punchline was really their last stand during that time before the walls came crashing down. Dropping in January of 95, it's clear from the first note that this wasn't the same band who had charmed the world with more than words and funked it sideways would get the funk out. Waiting for the Punchline was a gut punch. Raw, stripped down, a hell of a lot angrier, a hell of a lot more real than anything they did before. Recorded mostly at Criteria Studios in Miami, with some sessions back in Boston, this album was produced by Nuno Bettencourt and Bob St. John. Nuno had originally dreamed of making a really funky album after the lush ambition of Three Sides Every Story. But as the sessions went on and as the world around them was getting darker, what they ended up with was something way leaner. Gone with the strings, the choirs, the layered excess. This album sounded like four guys hammering it out in a smoky room, and it hits hard. And what really adds to that whole natural vibe of this album was the way they recorded it. No headphones, just bleeding amps, candles, carpets, incense. Players cranked so loud that the microphones picked up everything, including mistakes. And Bob St. John mixed most of the album using primitive 3-channel drum premixes and a minimal EQ. Raw, almost ugly by design. Songs like Naked captured that off-the-cuff energy. And for those uninitiated, that dynamic between Nuno and Gary during some of those quiet parts is frickin' chef's kiss. And Evangelist was chopped together from loops of Paul Geary's playing, stitched by hand with razor blades and tape. No poo tools, no digital safety nets. And behind the scenes, the band was cracking. Paul Geary left during the sessions to chase a new career in artist management. Mike Mangini, who would later rise to fame with Dream Theater, stepped in to drum on 3 tracks, Hip Today, Leave Me Alone, and No Respect. And if you listen close, that shift in style is obvious. Geary brought this really traditional straight-ahead rock thump, and Mangini is a rhythmic maniac who could outplay a drum machine. And Waiting for the Punchline was their heaviest record yet, not just sonically but lyrically. The song zeroed in on social decay, disillusionment, media hypocrisy. He hit everything. It's often described as a concept album, but not in the flowery, progressive sense. Real street-level concept where Punchline was that everything was falling apart. And Nuno's playing on this one totally out of this world. Stellar riffs, funky slashes of rhythm guitar, swampy tones dripping with attitude. He recorded much of this album using that trusty Washburn N4 loaded with the Bill Lawrence pickup and a 63 Fender Vibroverb that sounded like you could just reach out and twist the knobs yourself on that amp. Tracks like Cynical showcased a filthy, snarling guitar tone that somehow felt both broken and beautiful. Pure attitude on tape. And this attitude was something that was a bit more hit or miss on Extreme's earlier work. And despite the raw energy, Waiting for the Punchline hit a wall commercially. Peaked at number 40 on the Billboard 200, a brutal fall from the double platinum heights of Pornograffiti. Singles didn't chart, reviews were mixed. Some fans and critics accused Extreme of chasing grunge, even though the record was way far from that. It was just a hard reset, an honest pivot into this 90s world that no longer had the patience for all the flash and the irony and snare drums that resound through some kind of fake reverb for minutes at a time. And that Waiting for the Punchline tour slogged on through Europe and the US, but the writing was on the wall. Even their bass player, Pat Badger, later admitted some of the European routing just didn't even make sense. Changes in management soon followed. By 96, it was over. Extreme quietly disbanded after the tour wrapped up. No scandal, public flameouts, just a hard, inevitable end. And each member peeled off into their own thing. Nuno finally launched the solo career he'd been itching for, releasing Schizophrenic in 97, and he'd go on to form Mourning Widows, Population 1, and other projects. Gary Cherone landed the once-in-a-lifetime and arguably poisoned gig fronting Van Halen, staying until 99. I covered that one in total detail on Van Halen, the final years. Check that out in the description below for the link. Paul Geary built a second empire behind the scenes, becoming a top rock artist manager. Mike Mangini would eventually join Dream Theater, proving his insane chops on a global stage. So Extreme would lie dormant for years before stirring back to life in 2004 for a reunion, eventually roaring back with another album. But Waiting for the Punchline remains a fascinating artifact. Gritty, bloody-knuckled snapshot of a world-famous band realizing in real time that the world they conquered was slipping through their fingers. Instead of going quietly, they grabbed a few final swings at the walls on the way out. So then, Nuno's first major move? Schizophrenic, a solo album he'd been quietly piecing together for years, even as Extreme was going. Released in 1997, it was a radical shift, a sledgehammer smashing through any lingering expectations of late 80s shred glory. Forget funk metal grooves and glossy choruses. There's a lot of jagged, gritty DNA of grunge and kind of alternative rock thrown in here. This was inspired by the new soundscape that had toppled glam and hair metal. Nuno leaned hard into the stripped-down aesthetic, less guitar god worship, more moody textures and aching melodies. Nuno played damn near everything on the album, guitars, drums, bass, revealing the full extent of his musical brain. And his guitar work was still brilliant on this one, but what surprised people was how tight his rhythm section chops were, especially on the drums. Lyrically, record was hit or miss, flashes of cleverness in tracks like Crave, but a lot of post-grunge brooding and random imagery too. And hey, Gary Cherone even popped in to lend vocals on You. And critically, the album got some respect as a bold pivot, great solo effort, but commercially it was dead on arrival. Too weird for old-school Extreme fans, too out of place for the post-grunge generation. But Nuno wasn't sitting still. By 1998, he fired up a new band, Mourning Widows, a tight, edgy project that pushed even further into this raw rock territory. 2 albums, Mourning Widows in 98 and Furnished Souls for Rent in 2000, showed that he wasn't interested in chasing past glory. And then he evolved that project into Population 1, which eventually morphed into Drama Gods by 2005. Each shift keeping that core idea intact, freedom, groove, grit, and guitar work that never bows to the trends. And he wasn't working his own angles either. Nuno became one of rock's ultimate secret weapons, a hired gun who could do anything anywhere. Back in '90, he laced Janet Jackson's Black Cat with that searing guitar, helping hit #1. In 2006, he teamed up with Perry Farrell for Satellite Party, co-producing with ultra payloaded and blending electronica, rock, and funk. By 2004, he was jamming in Kings of Chaos, sharing stages with Guns N' Roses alumni, as well as Steven Tyler and Billy Gibbons. And then came the left hook that nobody saw coming, Rihanna. In 2009, pop's reigning queen periodically recruited Nuno to bring that rock edge to her live shows. And it wasn't a gimmick either. Nuno went all in, slamming R&B grooves into shape with that trademark ferocity. Tours, award shows, Super Bowl halftime shows, even jamming with Paul McCartney and Kanye at the Grammys. Some hardcore rock fans couldn't wrap their minds around it, understandably. Nuno Bettencourt, shredder extreme, backing a pop megastar, but to Nuno it made perfect sense. This is what he'd been trained for. Versatility, groove, no ego, just do it. Plus it pays the bills. And somehow through all this reinvention, the guitar community never forgot. He joined Generation Axe alongside Steve Vai, Zakk Wylde, Yngwie Malmsteen, Tosin Abasi, trading solos with the best of the best, and once again reminding everybody Nuno wasn't just a great 80s guitar player. He was, and is, one of the most dangerous players alive, in any era and on any stage. But Extreme wasn't over after Punchline. And really, Nuno and the gang always have a way of reinventing themselves. When Saudades do Rock dropped in 2008, it wasn't just another album, it was a resurrection. 13 years had passed since Extreme last unleashed new material, and the world of rock, of course, changed considerably in that gap. But the band's reformation sparked after Nuno's split from Perry's Satellite Party, and reunion gigs in 2004 and 2005 wasn't about nostalgia for the sake of it. Saudades do Rock, literally translating to nostalgic yearnings of rock, hit nice and hard. Organic, groove-heavy reminder that melodic hard rock didn't have to sound like a dinosaur, clinging to his last single. You had Gary back on vocals, Nuno Bettencourt producing, slashing up the guitars, Pat Badger back on that bass, a new drummer Kevin Figueredo pounding the skins, and this lineup came ready to fight. The album veered all over the map. Badass funk metal grooves on Learn to Love, swaggering melodic rock on The King of the Ladies, dusty country influences creeping to Take Us Alive, atmospheric ballads like Ghost that pulled from soulful, piano-steered rock traditions. It was eclectic without feeling chaotic, stitched together by Nuno's unmistakable guitar voice and the band's undying chemistry. Tracks like Star and Slide showed Extreme could still write the kind of songs that punched through speakers, even if the US mainstream wasn't exactly listening anymore. Commercially, the album didn't set America's tastes on fire, taking at number 67 on the Billboard 200, but boy, it exploded overseas, hitting number 2 in the UK, number 3 in Japan, where Extreme's technical brilliance and genre bending were still devoured like candy. The accompanying Take Us Alive World Tour with King's X along for the ride helped cement that comeback energy, and the live album DVD captured a band that had found its footing again, even if the industry was moving faster than ever. And then, silence, again. Nuno went on tour with Rihanna, Gary Sharon started Hurt Smile, Extreme became a sleeping giant, occasionally stirring but not roaring. That was until 2023. Six, their sixth studio album, was born out of years of slow burn writing, demoing, inevitable second guessing. As early as 2015, Nuno hinted that they had songs brewing, and by 2016, 17 tracks were in the can. But it took until early 2023 for everything to finally come together. Six dropped on June 9th, 2023, 15 years after their last album, and it was immediately clear this wasn't a polite comeback. It was bam, lick your hand and smack yourself upon your forehead good. Its lead single, Rise, hit like a meteor. Within days, Nuno's jaw-dropping solo was being hailed as the guitar solo of the century by Guitar World, a statement not tossed around lightly, depending on who you ask anyway. But Rise racked up millions of views almost instantly, and of course Brian May came in there and said that he loved it.
See, that to me is the epitome of what a solo should be on a record. On pure technical ability alone, that's colossal. I could never do that.
The solo's arrangement, kicking into a halftime feel to clear space for that explosion of tapping, phrasing, melodic mayhem, was crafted meticulously, and Nuno later revealed he specifically used an MXR Phase 90 pedal for that solo in honor of Eddie Van Halen. Eddie, who considered Gary Sharon a musical soulmate during his time in Van Halen, had wanted to hear Extreme's sixth album before it was finished, a tragic wish that didn't come to pass as Eddie passed away. That added a bittersweet gravity to Nuno's tribute. Musically, Six swung wildly between metal and pop sensibilities without ever sounding stitched together. Tracks like Banshee and Rebel showcased modern heaviness, while more melodic cuts kept Extreme's pop rock heart beating. Commercially, Six mirrored the trajectory of Saudades de Rock, a modest impact in the US, but a massive splash internationally, especially in the UK and Japan. But there's one constant from these two albums, it's that Extreme never aimed for safe comebacks. They made records when they had something real to say. The chemistry sparked hard enough to burn down the old playbook. From the 2008 revival to the 2023 eruption, Extreme stayed unpredictable, unfiltered, and, thanks to Nuno Bettencourt's freakish talent and restless creativity, still dangerous. From the quiet streets of his homeland to the roaring stages of rock's biggest arenas, Nuno Bettencourt's journey is pure electricity. Dude from a small island in Portugal, landing in Massachusetts with a little more than rhythm in his blood, he didn't just chase that American dream, he set it on fire. Across Extreme's peaks, solo ventures, collaborations with legends like Steven Tyler, Steve Perry, Rihanna, Nuno built a career defined by fearless reinvention. Crowned early as Guitar World's best new talent, praised by Brian May as one of the greatest, he fused blistering technique with funk, soul, and punchy percussive attack that made every single note feel alive. And even decades into the game, from More Than Words to Rise, Nuno's playing still burns with that same energy. Definitely a reminder that true greatness isn't just about where you start, but how fiercely you keep moving forward. To my subscribers, thank you so much. You're freaking awesome. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, make sure you subscribe to this damn channel and smack the living hell out of that like button as well. Join the family. I want to thank you so much for watching.